Welcome to Behind the Sitco, where we pull back the curtain on the unseen truth of addiction recovery and talk about things most people never get a chance to see. I'm your host, Josh Torbich. Each week, we're sitting down with people who lived it, led it, and are still learning from it today. This isn't polished, it's real, it's raw, and it's noted in the faith and hope because we do recover. So whether you're in recovery, walking alongside someone who is, or just trying to understand what healing really looks like, you came to the right place. Let's dig in. Hey everyone, welcome to Behind the Sitco. I'm with one of my very good friends in the flesh, Steve Barger. Some people know him as Pixie. My favorite name is Pixie, yeah? He sprinkles dust everywhere he goes.
That's the F3 name.
The F3 name, because what he asked me when he first sat down in the seat was what?
Can I call you Beefcakes?
Can you call me Beefcakes? You know who I had on here before was Snickers. And the first thing that he did without asking permission, by the way, was call me Beefcakes.
Right.
So
it's always funny in public because, you know, all these big burly men have all these funny names, right?
Yeah.
And part of F3 is you got to be able to say the nickname in church, but we have some wacky nicknames.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
It's always fun to see people at a restaurant or at Walmart and call them Pixie or Beefcakes or whatever. Everyone's looking around like, what's going on here?
What's going on here? Some wouldn't be appropriate to say in church.
Right. Some of them are not, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. So a couple of the other places that you segue in, you're a very large pillar inside of our community. That's why I was really encouraged to be able to get you on here and have one of these conversations with you. And you're a first responder. You work in Southport as a first responder. You're also on the school board. You actually are just sharing with me, you just passed a gavel, right? So
Right.
You just recently are the outgoing chair of the school board of education for Brunswick County. And you've developed a pretty intense interest in making sure that our kids have progress inside of their future for as far as the relation to the schools go. What created that interest for you to begin with?
Absolutely. You know, so I go back to my early days in college. I initially went to college to study political science, and I wanted to be an attorney. And some things happened in the community, and I was like, man, am I really making an impact doing that, right? And so my mom had gotten breast cancer at the time, and I was really evaluating all the things that were going on in my life. And so I decided to get into EMT school. So I became an EMT, eventually became a paramedic, and ended up down here in southeastern North Carolina. I worked for Horry County Fire Rescue for a number of years, and now I'm a shift commander at the village of Bald Head Island, where I oversee a shift of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics. And so the way that transitions into the school system really is, you know, in law enforcement, we see folks typically after something bad happens. And so we deal with addiction kind of on the backside. It's more of the response than the prevention piece. And so when I got on the school board, I really became interested in how do we prevent kids from battling addiction from the onset, right? And I've had addiction problems in my past personally, as well as in my family. You know, my uncle, who is, you know, very close to me, I talk to him every single day. He battled addiction with drugs and alcohol, did prison time because of it. And so through my own addictions with alcohol, I was really able to lean on my Uncle Steve. And, you know, he's a really good mentor for me. He's somebody I lean on when I battle my own cravings or, you know, issues with my own addictions. And then being able to translate that into the school system. So with all of our partners that we have, you come into our schools all the time with Christian Recovery. And we're working with all of our nursing partners and stuff so we can try to capture all the kids where they're at and really crack down on the entry-level addiction and drug paraphernalia stuff that we have, really with the vapes and stuff like that.
Yeah, one of the interesting things you're kind of tapping into while you're speaking, everyone in American history, right, in the substance use disorder world, have talked about the great demand issue that we have, supply issue that we have, but not as much about the demand issue. You know, we always talk about drugs are polluting our streets and all of these things that are available to us that shouldn't be available. But on the prevention piece, kind of what you're tapping into is, why do people find that as like a healthy outlet to cope with life and living on a day-to-day basis?
Well, you don't have to turn far in society, right, to see some sort of advertisement about, you know, whether it be alcohol, prescription drugs.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that the statistics still say that the most abused drugs right now are prescription drugs, right? They're easy to get. And it doesn't just affect one socioeconomic class either. I think that's been the big thing over the years is people thought, you know, in rural or poor America, it was more prevalent. but really, I see doctors, lawyers, all kinds of wealthy folks, very successful folks,
Yeah.
also battling addiction as
Doesn't
well.
discriminate,
Nope.
does it? Yeah, some of the so let me frame this up for the folks today because we asked you some pretty thick questions. He said, yeah, Steve said the questions were challenging. Good. So he had to actually do a little bit of fishing to go find the answers to some of them. But in the conversation today, there's this, I'm just going to frame this up for the folks. There's this large community of kiddos that gather together for 6 hours every day, right? And a lot of them are wrestling with their own identity issues. They're dabbling in certain things. And then we all know what that peer to peer influence looks like. And then there's a more significantly smaller population of positive influence coming from coaches, teachers, administration, all of those things. So when you talk about the system of our school, helping or hurting create prevention efforts or reinforcing that peer-to-peer negative influence side? Is it leading people closer to addiction, and how do we get ahead of that?
Mhm.
So that is a big bowl of a
It is.
conversation
It
that we're
is.
going to get into today. And the first one that I kind of wanted to get into with you is what kind of ways, and this is ripping the Band-Aid right off, do you think that the school system currently unintentionally might hinder early intervention efforts for students?
Yeah, I reached out to some of our staff, Jonathan Pascal, who's one of our assistant superintendents, and our social services and student services staff to kind of maybe get a little bit more insight on what they see day to day. And really, it's not about the hindrance. One of the biggest hurdles we have here in Brunswick County is just the overcrowding of our schools, which means we have a lot more students that can kind of blend in. And some of the early signs or risk factors that you may notice in a smaller school environment
Yeah.
sometimes can get missed because we have so many students in high school and middle school right now. And middle school is where I really like to focus these efforts, right? So coming out of elementary school, middle school students are really learning how to have a little bit of freedom, a little bit of responsibility. We're learning the students rapidly who can't handle that at the same time, right? Which is why we have a lot of behavioral issues and fights and stuff at the middle school level. And then also, that's where the curiosity is peaked. So that's where the vaping starts, and now you can get these THC vapes and all those sorts of things. So I don't think that there's no deliberate means of the school system hindering it. I think there's just challenges that we face, but I also think that we do a really good job in Brunswick County schools of prevention in a global environment where all of the students go to an assembly, kind of like the ones you do at some of our schools, and we talk about it out loud. We make it okay to talk about it. And then also being able to identify those kids who might have higher risk factors so we can identify them and work with them to make sure that we are, engaging in those conversations, creating that trust with an adult. Having a trustworthy adult in the school for a student is really a big thing. Our guidance counselors do a really good job of that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because the prevention piece is the most important part. And my colleagues in the school where we've talked about this for years, there's detectors that we put in bathrooms to detect vapes or stuff, but that's a response, right?
Sure.
If we can capture the student early on and we can prevent the curiosity, then we potentially don't need those things if we're doing a good enough job on the forefront, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you're talking about coping mechanisms for kids, I got to tell you, when I first found 151 rum,
Mm-hmm.
there was nothing that would help me fix the current situation that I was going through like 151 rum. And I think that you're saying a lot of wise things, because once you start to dabble in that being a potential solution, it's hard to kind of fight the uphill battle of developing healthy coping mechanisms. Healthy coping mechanisms don't come naturally to folks, especially our young kiddos, whenever they're traveling through the school systems.
That's a good point too, because I grew up in an upper middle class home. My mom and dad did not battle addiction. I remember growing up, my dad could buy a 6-pack of beer and it would last him a week.
Yeah.
So I was never really exposed to really what addiction was. I remember when Uncle Steve went to prison for drug trafficking charges. We were just told Uncle Steve went to drive a locomotive, and he was going to be gone for a while. It wasn't until I was probably a teenager that I found out that Uncle Steve had gone to prison.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of shielded from that in my family. My grandfather was an alcoholic, and so it was like cliche in our household, right? So instead of talking about it, we kind of hid the fact that it was going on. So when I got in college and realized that, I was very impulsive, I didn't have good coping mechanisms. And again, you said you found 151. I was a vodka drinker, and college gets away, right? College students go through a lot of things. And because I didn't have those coping mechanisms, I turned to alcohol, and it became a major problem for me. And
It
so
gets you downtown now.
it does, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously through getting sober for me, it took me almost losing my wife and kids, right? And losing my family. And so that's one of my biggest motivators from, for joining you and a lot of the stuff that we've partnered with in the past is preventing people from getting to the point where I got to, where I almost lost my family over it and trying. So taking that back to the students, if we can give them those coping mechanisms now, and we can address all the things that addiction can be, because it's not just heroin and cocaine or fentanyl, right? Those are the things that are in the news.
Yep.
There's a lot of unhealthy addictions and impulsivity in this world that we can teach kids how to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, we hold them in our pockets, right? Those things are definitely the prolonged version and exposure to social media clips 30 seconds at a time.
It's that dopamine hit.
Yeah, it is. It's the same thing, isn't it? A lot of people don't realize that that's the same thing as what we're experiencing when we do go take a shot of vodka.
That momentary dopamine hit is the high that everybody's chasing all the time.
Yeah, it is.
And so for you and I, it might have been drugs and alcohol. For somebody else, it could be a social media, a certain number of likes on something.
Yep.
I'm kind of an adrenaline junkie. And so I've had to really
as a first responder, right?
Right. So I've had to really, transition my my need for speed per se, right, into something healthy. And so that's how I end up, with all my crazy running I do. But it's just finding those healthy habits. So I did Celebrate Recovery when I was battling alcoholism, and everybody has a habit, or a hang up. And that's what that's big for. And being able to learn that I'm not broken. I'm not the only one going through this. Other people can. It's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that I love being able to do now, holding countywide elected office, being a first responder, and telling people that I'm also you, right? So when I come and do chapel periodically with your folks and talk about that, that doesn't have to define who you are today. You can still be very successful and talk about it. And the best thing I could ever do in my life is to prevent somebody from getting to the point where I got to.
Yeah, that's really beautiful, man. That's what it's about. That reciprocity that kind of kicks in, and our desire in recovery to give it back to other folks. You tapped into a good conversation point about the overcrowding inside of the schools. It comes with the territory when you have such a rapidly expansive county, and there's a whole wild range of issues that we get into, but that real place is that there's not enough of the teacher pool to interact individually whenever we see the warning signs with the students. You have to wrestle with that at a high level on the board often. What are some of the major decisions that get brought to you through that process, or some of the things that you see on a regular basis that you and the rest of the school board members really wrestle with around having enough money to employ more teachers and supportive staff, or even building new schools, right, is what it boils down to?
Yeah, capacity is probably our biggest problem right now. So we have a school bond that's going to be on the ballot in November 2026. It's a little over $350 million, or actually just below $350 million. And that's a lot of money, right? But our schools are overcrowded. And I always kind of, this seems like a trivial thing to kind of relate it to, but I always think of cattle in a field, right? You have a small field with a ton of cattle in it. They're all bumping into each other. You can't identify individual cattle or whatever it may be. And then you have, these fields that have less cattle in them that might be a little bit smaller, but you can see them because they're more spread out, right? So our students are the same way. When we have a high school where the hallways are packed, and it's like a mob of folks coming down the hallway, you can't see each individual kid if they have a vape in their hand or maybe something else, right? And so then they get lost in the shuffle. And so that's one thing that we're always going back and forth with, is our capacity issues and staff wise too. So the state provides the funding for teaching positions. That's based on student numbers. The problem is when we don't have the room capacity to put the teachers in for the students, then they all end up really collected together. I think about assemblies when folks come and talk to our students. We have some, like our high schools, for example, we can't put all of the high school students into the gymnasium at one time. That could be a hurdle to having prevention programs come in, somebody come in talking about addiction and all that kind of stuff. You might have to do it in multiple sessions, and then scheduling gets to be a problem. So, talking about some of those hurdles we were talking about earlier, are hindering some of the prevention. It's not purposeful hindrance, but I do think sometimes that does happen. So we're hoping now, once this bond, once we get into support from the voters for this bond, we can get some new schools built, get some of these kids spread out a little bit more. It allows us to build more personal relationships with our students and be able to
Mhm.
notice the early risk factors.
Yeah, see and that really is early intervention
Mhm.
and prevention whenever you can have true relationships with people to kind of take pause when maybe they're not willing to share that something's going on in their life, but you can see the signs and you're able to actually focus and pay attention. It's funny you said the cattle thing, of course. The resources, if you overcrowd a field, don't exist anymore.
Right.
And that's kind of what we're talking about here. It's I think they told us when we wanted to put cows out here on this property, they said you need 1 acre per cow just
Mhm.
because, you got to keep them alive based off of the feeding and stuff. And that's a great analogy with it. When you get these decisions, up at the board level, like even to publish or put out the $350 million bond to build new schools, you guys really weigh in over the course of many years. Probably
Oh,
you've been
absolutely.
contemplating that. At
Yep.
what place do you know it's the right time for you and the collective board to pull the lever on something like that?
This has been a very unique season to be able to look at a bond. So that without getting into too much of the politics of it, there's really this anti-government, anti-political movement going on nationwide and in this county, right? And this county is growing rapidly, and it's creating more cost for the average homeowner. And so there's really this, we need to stop building movement going on. And one of the consequences of this rapid growth and building we're having is we need to build more schools, which is going to, incur a property tax increase for folks. So, we're trying not to punish the people who live here. We want to show them that the services are going to increase as well. And that's the big thing is, we are growing rapidly. We've managed it pretty well, but we're also working on a school bond that was passed in 2016.
Oh,
So
wow.
having concurrent school bonds going on kind of makes it a little bit of a challenge, but we've already finished those projects. We finished them early. So this allows us to go back and form a new project list. And again, in a county that's this size, it's hard because like right now, a lot of the growth is focused in Leland. And so, but we need to gain support from the voters in Calabash as well. So
Mhm.
trying to spread out the wealth, spread out the project, so everybody's getting something new and shiny in it to create create an attractiveness in it is really important.
Yeah, wow. That's a you trying to sell it to the general population. You would hope that people would understand the dynamics involved with our school system that we're
Right,
talking about today, because it does seem like simple X's and O's, but you're saying that there's another pitch and sell
there is.
type of thing that you're, find yourself always advocating for with the general public. They don't
Yep.
understand a lot of the details that are around it, and you have to make sure those things go off.
And specific to this, even right. So like as we build new schools, we bring in more guidance counselors,
Yeah.
social services, more of our student therapy type stuff going on with student services. So that expands our ability to again to build those relationships with our young people and capturing our young people at the earliest point possible is really important because for years I'm a firm believer in the DARE program, but for years students would do DARE in fifth grade and then we would never touch drugs and alcohol
Mhm.
prevention ever again. And like I was telling you, middle school I think are the most vulnerable
Yeah.
because they're gaining some of that freedom. Cell phones become more of a thing, peer pressure becomes more of a thing. We have no idea what they're seeing on social media or YouTube. You have young kids just like I do, and the things our kids are faced with on a day-to-day
Yeah.
basis, you and I never saw
Yep.
when we were growing up. And so it's really important to build that foundational relationship with our students, which is why I'm super proud of, being able to, through communities and schools, we have that lunch buddy program. So adults can go in and eat lunch with students who don't have a good home life, may not have a mother or a father, and build those relationships. The Watchdogs program we have in Brunswick County Schools, which is unfortunately has been kind of coined the cool dad club. But again, it's just getting male role models into elementary school because we didn't have that for so long. There's a lot of female employees in elementary school, and there's a lot of young men who don't have good home lives or father figures that are missing out on that piece, and that
Wow.
plays directly into the preventative
Yes, it
aspect. Yeah.
does. Yeah, I never knew about the second one that you said. I knew what the communities and schools were doing with
Yeah.
the Lunch Buddy program. Talk a little bit more about that. What is the
The
watch?
watchdogs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Watchdogs
So
program.
Keith Schumacher, who is a retired Atlanta firefighter, I met him a couple years ago, and he started the Alliance for Father Friendly Schools. And so he came to me, and we talked about it, and obviously we connected on the fire department lingo and that kind of stuff. And he said, "I'd really like to get this started in Brunswick County." And we found out that a couple schools were doing it on their own. And so I think it was like Union and maybe Lincoln elementaries. And so he came, he made a pitch to the superintendent and I, and we talked about it. And so the school board actually approved it, and we paid for each school to have a charter of the Watchdogs organization. And again, it's just getting male volunteers into the elementary schools. So we do car rider line in the morning and afternoon. We just do lunch duty. We go and read to kids, just walk the hallways. Years ago, there was a thing called like Dads on Duty, creating like a school safety atmosphere.
Hmm.
Same thing. We wear our T-shirts that say Watchdogs on them. I got a cool pink one, and high five kids. And again, just building those relationships is so important.
Yeah,
And hopefully becoming that trusted adult for one of these students
sure.
who might have something going on at home.
Yep. Yeah. You never know when they're going to pick someone to
Right.
be the trusted adult. And
Yep.
that's what I've learned over it. We've had some genuinely shocking, experiences. I can't believe it's been 8 years now that we've partnered with you guys in the public school system
Yep.
to go in and share the presentations. And you know this better than most, but so we'll grab a few of the folks who are actively in the programs who volunteer and say that they're willing to come share their story. And I think the coolest part is we always try to find the 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are in our program, the younger ones. Because I'm 30, 34. They'll look at me like I'm an old man.
We're getting old.
Yeah, we're getting old. But when they see someone who might have been sitting on those bleachers just 5 years ago, they kind of perk up a little bit. And one of the coolest things that I've seen is they go in and they share. And it's really according to the context of like, man, I've just now been in rehab for 90 days. I wish I could go back to middle school and choose a different pathway because they don't find the consequences happening. They actually find the reward happening at the level that they're in middle school, high school. And that's, I think what I'm vibing a lot with what you're saying in the middle school thing. Cause I took my first drink when I was 13.
Mhm.
It is, that's the time that it's introduced to so many of our folks today. But when we do that and we watch people as they kind of travel through the recovery program, the gift gets given back to them when they go share those stories with the kids. And that's, part of our testimony that we were talking about. So I think about this with us. When we go into the school system, I've seen kids, and this is an incredible thing. This is a point I was making. I've seen kids come off of those bleachers, and for the first time, they'll choose one of the residents in the program to go share the horrors of their home life with.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that incredible?
And it's funny because you told me that a while back, and we even had students come off bleachers and hand you their vape before.
Hand vape
Right.
pens before.
And
Yep.
so what that speaks to is it's almost like a celebrity status in the moment, right? So you're there, one of your residents is there, and in that moment, you are the celebrity in that room.
Mm.
And so that is making these kids feel comfortable bringing a vape to you or saying, hey, I have this going on. Because in that moment, you're the most important person. And that's why I tell all the adults that work within our schools is you never know when you're going to be the most important person in that kid's life in that moment. Because everybody, kind of starts and ends the day the same. Everybody wakes up, everybody goes to bed. It's the decisions you're making in the middle that are going to influence not just your life, but the people around you.
Mm.
And so that's why these assemblies are so important. And again, why it plays into the whole school capacity thing is we got to be able to get the kids in there.
Yep. There's a finite amount of resources whenever it comes down to being able to actively invest in programs like this. I think that one of the harder jobs you and the rest of your board have evaluating success.
Mhm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that? And are we winning is the question. Are we moving it in the right direction is kind of what we're flushing out today in our conversation.
Mhm.
Where do you draw conclusions from on that?
So are we moving in the right direction, I think is the first question. And the answer is yes, but we're never going to be done, right? So I think the hardest part in the school system is every year the students are changing. So, the sixth graders become seventh graders. And so every year the age group population is changing. And we can't really use student cohorts as much in that because they go from elementary to middle school. Some of those kids stay together, some of them split apart, and then
Right.
from elementary or from middle school to high school, some of them split apart again, and then more of them come together.
Mhm.
And trying to make sure that we have a good foundation. That's why I talk about middle school a lot, right? So because if we're hitting all the middle schools, that means we will have touched all the high schoolers when they get there. And so, because if we wait till high school, it's a larger population and we're going to miss some kids just because of the sheer volume of students.
Mhm.
So, if we know we're getting them in that smaller environment in middle school, now being able to measure it, I think measuring that's really hard. I will tell you, we have more partnerships today than we've ever had with the Christian Recovery Center, with NC Reach, with social services and the health department here in the county. There's session law from the General Assembly that requires preventative education for drugs and alcohol.
Mhm.
So the state level government is partnering with us saying that you have to do this, and there's some funding with that. We utilize a ton of grants to bring folks in, and Novant's been a great partner for us because we've got some counseling services that we can do virtually now, where the students don't have to leave the school. So if
Mhm.
transportation is a problem when they get home, so I think we are winning, but my message to everybody is that we're never going to be done moving forward and adding more resources and more resources, because the outside influences are growing faster than we can actually provide the resources right now. So I think we just got to keep working on it, keep keep bringing in resources, keep um, really building up those relationships we already have, as well as bringing in new ones, and possibly tapping into some of these federal opioid dollars and stuff like that to hopefully reinforce some of these programs, because funding turns into a big issue with a lot of it. We've been fortunate in Brunswick County that we've gotten a lot of those grants, but sometimes those run out, right? So what I don't want to do is see us fall back from where we are today. I want to see us keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's a lot of partnerships you just named. That's going to be new information for a lot of people to understand the level that the school is actually engaged with other providers inside of our community around
Mhm.
the health and overall well being of the students. Is it, do you find it fairly easy to get consensus from the rest of the decision makers whenever it comes to these items around prevention efforts inside of the school system? I feel like we have something special happening. I was talking to the sheriff about this. I really truly believe that there's something special that happens in Brunswick County. We work really well together.
We do.
There is more, and I know this just from looking at other counties and the engagements that I've had there. There's a lot of siloed solutions, but somehow we've really created a community environment around these decision making processes, and we use each other to be able to serve. People are so surprised, for example, when they hear that we're going into the schools to lead prevention
Right.
exercises. You know,
The big thing about that too, I think, is the seamless transition from all these different agencies, right? So you mentioned the sheriff's office. We have SROs in every school, and while school safety is technically the school board's responsibility, we're able, because we have a great relationship and a great trust and framework with Sheriff Chisholm, to kind of give that to him, right? And with his staff, he provides an awesome piece for school safety and relationship building. So my kids go to, I've one at Bolivia Elementary, and that SRO there has been there for a long time. And if we see him in public, my daughter's running up and giving him a hug and stuff like that. What that tells me though is she feels comfortable with him,
yeah,
right? And so all of our students having those relationships with sheriff's deputies in their schools is super important.
yeah.
And the response we get from the sheriff's office, if we have concerns, he responds with additional resources when needed, right? Um, but then that's still kind of a response aspect of it. The biggest thing for prevention for me is utilizing our guidance counselors. They're really doing the hard work, right? So they're touching the students every day, and they're able to say, okay, this student came to me with this problem, and then let's plug them in with whatever resources are local to that area. And Meredith Lloyd does a great job with all of those programs for us, and not just managing them, but she's active in them all the time.
Hmm.
So she's one of the unsung heroes in our school system that doesn't get a lot of forward-facing public time. But without Meredith doing the hard work she does, we wouldn't be in the great position I think we're in right now.
The rest of the folks you work with, they see the importance of all
Oh,
of
they do.
this
Yeah,
very
Mr.
easily.
Gainey and I were talking on my way here. He's our new chairman of the school board now, and he battled alcohol addiction in his past as well. And so it's been really cool for him and I to talk about that.
Yeah.
And I was on my way here. I was like, hey, do you want me to say anything or plug anything? And I think it's just really good that our school board right now is made up of educators, parents, local business owners. Our experience on the school board is really vast. And so I think what that does is it gives us the ability to reach into all these different pockets of Brunswick County, all these different communities, and bring their lives and their experiences to the school board.
Yeah, it takes a large pool of expertise to make well-rounded approaches and decisions for the general population of our student body.
It
And that's
does.
kind of what you have on the board, right? A lot of different backgrounds.
We do right now. And the other thing I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about is like the treatment court we have in Brunswick County, right?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Judge Disbrow does such a great job with, that's a diversion program. And with the district attorney's office and, with Judge Disbrow and again, the sheriff's involved in that. And so again, that diversion program is not only keeping people out of prison and jail, but it's reforming them. And so again, all these partnerships, and we have some of our students who might graduate high school, 18 years old, might end up in treatment court. And so it really, the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to really help our community with addiction and substance use disorders as well.
Yeah, I agree. And that kind of leans into the next idea of the conversation. But there's parents, let's just say, and we know this from just our social circles, parents parent different ways.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some things, and I got to share this. One of the mistakes, I grew up in the most beautiful household, Christian home. I never grew up with a beer in the refrigerator, just didn't even know about it. But one mistake that they made with me, and I tell them this today, they trusted me too much.
Right.
They gave me way too much rope, way too much latitude. They didn't check in my references, is what
Right.
I joke and say all the time. I could say, hey, I'm going to Cody's house for the weekend, and they have no idea who Cody is and what his parents are like or none of that stuff. Is there anything that you guys kind of take that cloak of responsibility on inside of the school system to try to educate the parents about these kind of decisions that they could make to help shepherd the kids into a more preventative lifestyle?
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't know that we currently have programs where we bring parents into the fold on that kind of stuff. But through parent advisory councils and stuff like that conversation is always taking place, right? I think parenting in this modern age is just so difficult, So we used to hear from our parents, I walked uphill both ways to school, or in Ohio we talk about walking through 6 feet of snow, and that was a joke. It was just making it sound hard, right? But when you think of all the outside influences and all the people who have influence on our children today,
Yeah.
it's astounding. Especially
We're not the ones teaching them
no,
anymore.
we're not.
Yeah,
And so that's the big thing, with all these electronic devices and stuff like that, is really, we have no idea how many people are influencing our children on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And you've got to have that trust in that relationship. And it's not always just the checking up piece. So, I've got 3 daughters. I'm a girl dad. I can drive a mad Barbie convertible. I can tell you that. I can braid hair and all that.
Remind us of their ages real quick for the folks.
15, 12, and 9.
I remembered you had a broad base of them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're a blessing. I have a high schooler, a middle schooler, and an elementary. My wife, Brandy, works in the school system as well. And, she's my partner in life, my partner in crime. And, we definitely do the good cop, bad cop thing with the girls sometimes. But I say all that to say, we have a great relationship with our daughters. And they come to mom and dad for different things, but they come to mom and dad. That's the big thing, right? And so, because it's not always, I talk to folks all the time and say, well, I have the password to my kid's phone. I can check it at any time. Well, do you? But if you're checking it and finding something bad, that's a response, right? How do we educate these children to know the dangers and the risk factors of all this online stuff, the stuff they're feeding into their brain? It's just like, professional athletes. They have very regimented exercise programs and diets, because what you put into your body is what you get out of it. Same thing with your mind, right? If you're putting a bunch of rubbish and garbage into your mind, you're going to get that out. And that's been a big thing for me, trying to work on my mindset and making sure I'm putting good things, even music. I mean, for years, I would listen to music that was not good for my mind, right? And I didn't realize how much that was influencing me, even as an adult. Really?
Yeah, I find that from the teachings of Paul inside of the Bible. He kind of alludes to that idea of you are what you eat, but with the
Yep.
mind.
Yeah.
And that, you're talking about something we didn't intend to today, but I was just pondering it while you were finishing that last comment. That's what prevention looks like inside of the household on the family relationship aspect of it. Um, but you're wrestling with the idea. This is kind of what you're describing, and I'm thinking about it. My kids are 4 and 3, so I have a small temporary reprieve on some. They're
Mhm.
still really reliant on mom and dad for everything, but the time's coming in the elementary school, the middle school, and of course the high school years where they're going to want to start contemplating what their own decisions look like
Yep.
on a day-to-day basis. How do you do that?
Yeah, and that kind of taps into that whole social emotional aspect of it, because then it becomes, what are they using as coping mechanisms?
Yeah.
And so, my middle schooler, she comes home a lot of times, and I would say, "Are we having your vent session today?" Because she'll just want to talk about things that happened in school, right? But that's her coping mechanism. She wants to come home and talk about it, which I'm eternally grateful for. That we have that relationship with our daughters, that they can come home and talk about it, so that they're not having inappropriate conversations with their friends, or it doesn't turn into, as they get older, THC vapes or alcohol, or because they want to quiet their mind
Yep.
or put that away, right? Because it's the euphoria people, that I believe it's the euphoria people are chasing with substance use disorders. And so you can create euphoria without drugs and
That's
alcohol.
true. That's a
You
great
know what I mean?
point. Our natural high.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, again, you can have that dopamine dump so like my wife and I go for walks. She might have a stressful day at work, or I might have a stressful day, or whatever it may be. And it's like, you know what? Let's go for a walk. And my wife's been very supportive. And since I've become sober, we don't have alcohol in the house. I feel like I'm at a point in my life now where I could be there and I wouldn't have to go after it, obviously. But because she's so supportive of me, she just says, if you're not doing it, I don't need to do it.
Casey's the same way. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And so what we do now is, years ago, we would sit around and have a couple drinks at night. I would have a lot more, right?
Right.
But now we just go for a walk, and I still get that same enjoyment and high of
Yeah.
going for a walk, holding my wife's hand, whatever it may be, because again, it's that dopamine dump. It's that feel good feeling everybody's chasing, but there's healthy ways to do that.
That's really special. And you're right. That's hard work and an uphill sell because you have to maintain that type of life and engagement and relationships with other people.
Mhm.
But it's so much more meaningful, and trying to put that out in front of the kiddos. This is where the kind of prevention aspect for me is really, really the thing to focus on. The joke for me is I want to prevent. I want to do prevention so good that the recovery center doesn't need to exist.
Right.
Right.
No,
But I'll
absolutely.
come work for you. I'll
Put
come
yourself out of
find something
business.
else to do. Yeah. But I mean, the thing that I'm looking at for the kids is once they've tried it and they've considered it as a solution, drugs and alcohol, right? Or they've picked up the carts, right? A lot of people don't know about it's interesting. The kids today talk with an entirely different vernacular.
Totally different.
I mean, like just the words.
And it changes. I tried to be hip with my daughters before and use a word I heard them use, like, oh, we don't talk like that anymore.
Yeah, we don't say
Well, you
that
did last
word
week.
anymore. It was like 2 minutes ago that was the word to
Right.
use. I know. But so carts, the weed vape
Yeah.
pens that are just on the marketplace everywhere, man.
Yep.
And not even knowing what those things are, how they're so accessible to them. There's a smoke shop at every corner, and unfortunately, the consequences for selling to minors aren't as robust as they potentially could be to prevent that kind of activity. And that's a whole nother separate side of legislation to where
Yep.
they even they build these at every corner, and they make them very appealing to minors.
And
They
they
look like a
market them to
circus.
minors. That's the thing,
Yep.
is like when you look at these vape pens, or
Yep.
even like the with alcoholic beverages now, and the artwork on the cans. I mean, I was at a grocery store the other day, and I saw that Bang Energy has an alcohol version now.
There you go. Yep.
So again, it's marketing it to young people.
Yeah.
Because if they hook you, same thing with our cell phones. If you become an Apple user at 16, you're probably going to be an Apple user at 60, right? If you become a drug and alcohol connoisseur
Yep.
at whatever young age, you're probably also going to do that at 60, right? That's how they're getting you hooked.
Yep, absolutely. And so as a society, people don't, that's almost like the unseen battle that we have over our children
Mhm.
is there's a whole slew of negative influence that's coming for them. No
Mhm.
matter what, like
And
we
how do you make
can't do it.
responsibility fun and enjoyable? That's the big thing is, how do you show your kids that you can have fun being responsible
Yep.
when the world is telling them responsibility doesn't matter, have fun.
Yep.
And again, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, but that's how we get so many issues with people having unhealthy sexual relationships too.
That's true.
Because
That's not off topic. That's
this
inside of the school
world,
system.
this
Yeah.
world is telling them it's okay to have unhealthy, personal and sexual relationships with people.
Yep. You're absolutely right. And that's another feeding back into their identity, how they're
Mhm.
coping, going back to all of those things. I see that as such it's a very, very closely relatable topic as far as the sexual morality aspect goes into substance use disorder.
Mhm.
It's a risky behavior that they're using to kind of cope with a current situation in life.
It leads to so much depression in young people,
Yes, it
which
does.
then they turn to the wrong coping mechanism. So, I mean, it's all connected. And again, it's just really hard. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges I see being on the school board is trying to make sure we're supporting students, staff, and families and being there for them, and also not being the parent for them, right? Like, government is not the answer to everything. But what we can do is we can be a partner and get them to the resources and the avenues they need to be on.
That was great. Leading right into the next comment that I was going to ask you are some of the things that you believe are a higher priority for you. It sounds like reaffirming, reestablishing, keep working on that partnership between you and parents, teachers and parents,
Mhm.
right? The entire school system process and parents. What does that look like for you over the next couple years?
So we're continuing to invest in a lot of technology in that aspect with apps, so teachers can communicate with parents on these apps and really have live communication, at their fingertips. And then also bringing in a lot more resources with our community partners, so that because you would actually be surprised how many folks are utilizing a lot of community, um, relationships and a lot of community partners outside of school. And so bringing that into the school kind of gives a seamless transition between home life and school life, right? And so that's a big deal. But again, just allowing on our website, we have forms parents can fill out anonymously if they need to. The whole gaggle thing, which is like a cellular device monitoring thing we do with students in school. All these different avenues that we can do to tie this all back together to make sure that we are putting positive things into our students' minds.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as you work on those initiatives, and I kind of picked up on what you're saying, the doctor's office, it's amazing. Now, I don't know if it's actually my doctor, but I can send a chat on
Yeah.
that doctor's thing. It would be a great thing to streamline that communication between parents and
And we have
kids.
that now, yeah.
That's
And what we
phenomenal.
did now is we transitioned from multiple apps, so like from elementary having their own, middle school having their own, high school having their own, to now we use one app for that. So again, I have students at all three levels. I go to one app to communicate with all of my kids' teachers.
Yeah,
So
that's a great improvement around that. So let me think about this. If you could redesign anything for the school system, like I'm talking about Pixie has a magic wand,
Pixie's magic
right?
wand.
And you could just boom, make it so.
Yeah.
What would it be?
You know, for me, again, I know I talk a lot about outside influences, but that's so much of it. If there was a way to protect the school day from the outside influences that make school dangerous per se, I'm not saying our schools are dangerous, but if we could protect the school environment from those outside influences where drugs and alcohol and sex were not part of the conversation, I think we would go a long way. And I think one of the things we've done that's helped with that a lot is the Yonder pouches in middle school. I'll be honest with you, I was not a fan of those Yonder pouches
I'm
initially.
not sure, but tell what they are. Talk to me
Yeah,
about
so
them.
basically, I should have brought one with me. It's a magnetic pouch. The cell phone, their earbuds, smartwatches go into it, and it closes, and they can't open it until I go past one of the opening devices at the end of the day. Yeah,
Wow. Okay.
and
I
so
didn't.
what
Is
that's
that
done,
in the school system right
yeah,
now?
it's all of our middle schools.
Wow.
And so what
Okay.
that does is, these cell phones are a big driving factor to a lot of bad decisions.
Sure.
And so that takes away some of the influence that we just talked about. It also takes away some of the peer pressure because now we're not videoing Josh with a vape. So it's not cool now.
Yeah.
If Josh is doing a vape by himself and it's not appearing on TikTok, then Josh isn't getting the likes and the dopamine dump that he wanted. So now it's not fun. So now like there's just a lot of preventative measures in that, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, so in middle school, cell phones are gone. And so far, we've seen really good increased academic achievement, lower instances of fights and bullying. And again, when you go into the lunchrooms in these schools, they're loud again because people are talking.
People are
And
talking.
that's what's important.
Yeah. Why not in the high schools? What? Just a quick question about that. Why is that not a thing in the high schools?
So we started with a pilot last year at 2 schools, Town Creek Middle School and Cedar Grove Middle School, had really good outcomes with that. So we decided to go all middle schools this year. And it could potentially become a high school thing in the future.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I never heard of that. You know how grateful we are for you.
Yeah.
I
Well, I'm
said it
grateful
at the
for you.
beginning, man, but you're a pillar in our community. Your family's here, your kids are in the school system, and you're just fighting to make sure that we're a better place. So I appreciate that. Last question for you, but all the folks want to know it. What keeps you going with all of this stuff? You work, every single day like we all do, but then you have all of these. You got a family, your extracurriculars to try to help our community be a better place. What are you driving for?
Yeah, I'm just driving to. I got to where I am today because other people helped me, and so if I can help positively influence or build somebody up or be a resource for them to reach their goals and be successful, then I just want to be able to give a little bit back. It's really a servant leadership model that I employ at work, and I just care about people. I care about this community. I want to see it prosper. I've always told everybody, I want to end generational poverty in Brunswick County, because we have a lot of it when you get away from the beaches. And that starts with preventing substance use disorder. It starts with having good public schools, having good jobs, and all of those things coming together. Because if we can end generational poverty in this county, I think we can step back and say we did something good.
That's incredible. I agree. Yeah, that's awesome. Got Steve Barger, outgoing chair for the Brunswick County School Board, advocate inside of our community for all the things that are good that we're trying to work on today. We appreciate you being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a blessing, and I'm grateful for the opportunity. And you've been a great pillar in our community as well, Josh. And I would be remiss if I didn't talk about that in your organization. So thank you.
Thanks, brother. We appreciate you tuning in with us today, and we'll see you next time.